So my name is Francesca Froy and I work at the LEAD programme at the OECD. At the LEAD programme we've been doing a review of local responses to the crisis, to the current economic crisis. And what we find to be very interesting is that while there are some responses that are very familiar to us, that we've seen time and time again over the 27 years that our programme has existed, there are also some new activities that are happening now at the local level which reflect the very specific nature of this economic crisis, the way that governments are responding to the crisis, and also current broader global trends. So I'm just going to give you a flavour of what we've found to be happening at the local level. When the LEAD programme was born back in 1982, there was a very different economic crisis taking place. It was a structural crisis. LEAD was born when in fact there was a problem with traditional manufacturing, and many traditional manufacturing firms, those involved in steel, in coal, in heavy engineering for example, were closing down in lots of regions in OECD countries. And the response at that time at the local level was partly to encourage new inward investment, also to try and retrain the redundant workers from those industries into new growing sectors, for example the services, but also to develop some bottom-up local development. So communities started helping themselves. They started developing local employment initiatives and employment partnerships. So at that time in the 1980s there was the development, for example, of the territorial pacts in Italy. In Canada there was a new community future development programme. Lots of local partnerships doing local things, and they involved the private sector, the public sector, and also NGOs in working together to try and develop local communities. So the LEAD programme was born to try and share information between countries internationally so we could share information on best practice at the local level. In this current crisis, we're finding some similar activities. Again, we're finding in some countries there's a new emphasis on local employment partnerships. And also some of the other key elements we saw 20 years ago, an emphasis on entrepreneurship development. So trying to boost job creation through entrepreneurship as a response to the fact that some firms are having to shed workers. But there are also some very different things about this crisis. This isn't by origin a structural crisis. The problem here is obviously that there's been a loss of trust in the financial sector, there's been a drying up of cash flow, and this has had ongoing impacts in terms of a declining demand, which is affecting all sectors in the economy. And so, in fact, in response to this crisis, the government has been developing very different responses in many OECD countries. We're seeing often that the governments are seeing this as a temporary crisis, and this is also being acted out at the local level. There are lots of activities to bridge between a previous period of high growth and a projected period of high growth in 2 or 3 years' time. So, for example, at the local level, but also in national policies, there's an attempt to stop companies from shedding workers by encouraging short-term working, encouraging companies to train their staff rather than get rid of their staff. And also there are lots of activities to try and ensure that people remain connected to the labour market in this time. So either by encouraging employers to keep staff, but also by ensuring that those unemployed people go into education and training so they don't lose their contact with the labour market during this period. And that is often also particularly focused on youth. At the same time, however, the government response has been much more proactive in many OECD countries with a big fiscal stimulus, and this is having an impact at the local level with investment in local and community infrastructure and also jobs in the public sector. So we're seeing job creation at the local level now, which we might not have seen before in the public sector. And we're also seeing a kind of an investment in productivity, in skills upgrading. So not just in terms of retraining people for new jobs, but also generally raising skills levels, raising productivity. And I think this is one of the key things which will help communities to reposition for growth in the longer term in view of global trends such as the knowledge economy. Also in terms of climate change, because many of the new jobs that are being invested now are green jobs, for example. So what we're seeing is at the local level both the short-term bridging response, but also a very promising longer-term response to build productive and high-technology communities for the future.